Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about organic molecules. Last time we talked about chemistry, different types of atoms and chemical bonds. Now we're going to talk about some complex molecules that are held together with primarily covalent bonds. So definition for organic molecules are really easy. These are any molecules that contain carbon. If they contain carbon, they're organic. If they do not, they are inorganic. Something like water, that's inorganic. Something like glucose, that's organic. Now, organic molecules are often referred to as the building blocks of life because organic molecules tend to be large and very complex. And in order to make large and very complex things like human cells, we need large and complex molecules. Okay, so we're going to go over four major types of organic molecules. The first type that I would like to go over are called carbohydrates. Okay, so carbohydrates, these guys are, can't talk and type at the same time. Carbohydrates are organic molecules that consist of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a very specific ratio, and that specific ratio is 1 to 2 to 1. So we have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Now, if you think about it, a great example of a carbohydrate is glucose. This is probably the most common sugar in our bodies, really important sugar. It should be said that carbohydrates and sugars are kind of synonymous, right? Glucose is a very common carbohydrate. The chemical formula for glucose is C6H12O6. A couple things about carbohydrates. They come in different forms. A simple sugar, which, such as glucose, exists as a single ring of carbon molecules. So a single ring of these carbon molecules stuck together is called a monosaccharide. Make him bigger. Okay. Glucose is a great example of that. Another monosaccharide that you might run into, these are fructose, galactose, deoxyribose, and ribose. But glucose is really the most common monosaccharide, single ring of carbon. Carbons with some oxygen and hydrogens coming off to the side. Now, two monosaccharides stuck together, that is a disaccharide. For example, if you take glucose and fructose and you stick it together, you get sucrose, which is a really common sugar. This is the sugar that you'll find in something like sugarcane. Like we just planted a bunch of sugarcane in our backyard, super good. You can take the sugarcane and it contains all of this sucrose that you can eat, right? Now, if you take multiple monosaccharides and you connect them together into a long chain, that is called a polysaccharide. So two monosaccharides is called a disaccharide, and a long chain of monosaccharides is called a polysaccharide. A great example of a polysaccharide is starch or glycogen. Starch is found in bread, and then glycogen is a really important polysaccharide that our body uses to store glucose in our livers when we have excess glucose in our blood. Okay. So a couple of things about carbohydrates. They have a ton of energy stored in them because of all those covalent bonds. Remember, covalent bonds are like the most energy-rich bonds of that we talked about. Well, all of those carbons are connected together with these covalent bonds, and we can use that energy to do things. And in fact, glucose is the primary kind of ingredient for cellular respiration. If you remember, we take glucose, and through cellular respiration, we're able to produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct, ATP, and water, right? And so that ATP is called adenosine triphosphate, and this adenosine triphosphate molecule contains a lot of energy in that second phosphate to phosphate bond, which we can use to do work throughout the cell. So basically, we use the energy stored in glucose, we convert it to ATP, and we can then use that energy wherever we need. All right. So that's kind of the deal with carbohydrates. Next up, our second type of organic molecule. These are called lipids. Okay, and a good definition for a lipid is carbon. It's a molecule that consists of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but it's not really in this 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. It's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that doesn't dissolve in a polar solvent, right? The most common polar solvent is water, right? So a solvent is something that dissolves things, and if it's polar, it consists of polar molecules. We know that water is polar. So if you have a molecule that contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and it doesn't dissolve in water, it's a lipid. Carbohydrates are not like that. These guys definitely dissolve in water, and they do this because different parts of the carbohydrate, like glucose, contains positive and negative charges. The water molecules are attracted to those positive and negative charges, and so they dissolve it. Whereas lipids, they don't have these positive and negative charges. They're completely neutral, and they will not dissolve in water, right? I kind of use water, I described it last time as a bunch of magnets. Like you'd almost think of water as a bunch of refrigerator magnets. If you took a bunch of ping pong balls and a bunch of refrigerator magnets and put them all in the same bag and shook them up, would the ping pong balls be all interdispersed within the magnets? Nope. The magnets would stick together on the bottom because they're heavy, and then the ping pong balls, they're not attracted to magnets, they'd be on top. That's exactly what happens when you mix a lipid or a fat with water. They just don't mix. Lipids are typically not as dense as water, so they're going to go on the top layer. Water is going to go on the bottom layer. Okay. Now, lipids are really important because it's a great way to store energy. Probably the most simple and common form of lipid is called a fatty acid. Now, a fatty acid consists of a chain of carbon molecules with hydrogens going off to the side. Fatty acids come in two different types. You have saturated and unsaturated. If a fatty acid is saturated, that means that all the carbon molecules are held together with single bonds. And so it's like this really straight line of carbons. If two of those carbon molecules are held together with a double bond, that creates a kink in the fatty acid and is considered to be unsaturated. Lipids that are made up of saturated fatty acids are typically solids at room temp, things like butter or shortening, whereas unsaturated fatty acids are made up of are liquids at room temp, things like oils. And, it's a little bit easier for the enzymes of the body to break down these unsaturated fatty acids because they do have that little kink in them. It allows the enzymes to get in there, okay? Related to a fatty acid is called a triglyceride. Triglycerides are probably the most common lipid that you'll find in the body. And what this consists of is 3 fatty acids connected to another molecule called glycerol. This is really important because triglycerides are great for storing energy. They can store a lot of energy in a tiny amount of space. And when we have extra fuel in our bodies, when we consume too many calories, our body converts those extra sugars, extra fats, proteins into triglycerides where they store them away. That's our fat tissue, right? That's what makes up our adipose tissue. This is stored energy. And a lot of energy can be stored in triglycerides. Like the adipose tissue of a human is very similar in chemical composition to butter. It has the same consistency, very similar kind of internal makeup. Do you know how many calories are in a pound of butter? Like a whole pound is what you buy in the store, the little box. There's about 3,400 to 3,600 calories in a pound of butter. That's about how many calories are in a pound of your adipose tissue. So the body does a great job of storing away all those nutrients. I mean, think about it. If you go to the gym and you type in your height and weight on the treadmill and you start jogging, how long does it take to burn off 3,600 calories or a pound of adipose tissue? A long time. And that's because the body does such a good job of storing this energy. Probably too good of a job. I mean, think about it. Humans have existed on this world for a long time, like 4 million years. And 99% of that time, calories were not readily available like they are today. So the human body evolved a really nice way of storing a lot of energy because food was hardly ever in abundance. Well, now we have the opposite problem. Food is very easy to come by. Like McDonald's is pretty cheap and you can have access to calories as much as you want, right? That's why obesity is one of the leading causes of health problems and even death today. It's unfortunate. All right, so that's the deal with triglycerides. Triglycerides are also found around organs. They help to cushion organs, and they also have to insulate heat within the body so you don't get too cold, right? They also help to hold organs into place, which is very important. We'll talk about that later, okay? Okay, another type of lipid that's really important is called a phospholipid. This consists of a phosphate head, which has a negative charge, so it has a charge, and then two fatty acid tails that come off. This is the primary component of the cell membranes. Part of this phospholipid is attracted to water. The polar head has a negative charge, it's attracted to water. The fatty acid tails are not. So when you have, let's consider a cell, like the inside of a cell is primarily water, right? Cytoplasm is really just salty water. The outside of the cell is also primarily water. So a cell membrane is separating two bodies of water from each other. When you put a bunch of phospholipids in this situation between two bodies of water, the phosphate charged heads are going to be attracted to each body of water, and the fatty acid tails are going to point away from each body of water. That's going to create this automatic arrangement, this phospholipid bilayer, which we're so familiar with when we think about cell membranes. Okay, so that's really the primary component of cell membranes. Super important. It makes the boundary of every cell in our body. Another type of lipid, which is worth mentioning, are steroids. These are rings of carbon that are connected together, and these are really important hormones, and they can signal and cause changes in the body when they are released by certain endocrine glands. And they can also be therapeutic when they're used as drugs, right? Cool. So that about sums it up for lipids. Next, let's jump into our third type of organic molecule, and those are proteins. So proteins are important. These are based on the basic definition of a protein is this is any organic molecule that contains nitrogen. Okay, so any organic molecule that contains nitrogen is a protein, and these guys are based off of 20 different amino acids. They're built off of, or they're made up of these amino acids. Now we have 20 different amino acids. You don't have to memorize what their names are, what they look like, but think of them as little beads that are hooked together on a string. It's almost making like a beaded necklace. Each little bead is an amino acid, and these guys are connected together on this little string. They're connected with these special bonds called peptide bonds that hold them together. And the long string of amino acids is going to produce, ultimately, a larger protein. Now, this is kind of how it works. Some of these amino acids have a positive charge, some of them have a negative charge, some of them have a neutral charge. And they're put together in a very specific order in this beaded necklace, okay? Now, once this beaded necklace is formed, the charges of all these amino acids are going to cause that string with all the beads to coil up into a very specific orientation. The shape of that particular protein that's made, that determines what protein is made, right? There's special parts of the cell, we'll talk about this later, that make proteins. Those are called ribosomes. They're going to put together these amino acids in a very specific order, and that produces all the different proteins in our body. Some proteins are really large. They consist of hundreds of thousands of different amino acids, and they roll up into these very complex shapes. Let's consider one protein consists of all these amino acids. It's coiled up into a shape. It might have a little spot on it that fits glucose just perfectly, okay? And another spot that fits fructose just perfectly. So if there's glucose and fructose in the same environment as this protein, glucose pops in and then fructose pops in. Well, when that happens, it causes the charges of that protein to rearrange themselves a little bit. The protein changes shape, it slams those two monosaccharides together, causing them to form a disaccharide, which is sucrose. That really what I just described is an enzyme. That's a protein that facilitates or speeds up a chemical reaction by slamming the two reactants together. So enzymes are examples of proteins. Another enzyme might take sucrose, which is a disaccharide, and split it apart. That's exactly what it's doing. Now, if this protein were to unravel due to the fact that it experiences really high temperatures or acidic conditions, that's called denaturing. And once a protein is denatured, it can no longer be used. Like it's ruined, and it has to be remade. Okay. So proteins are super important. When they absorb energy, another important thing that's worth mentioning is that they typically change shape. So when ATP, the energy from ATP is released from that second and third phosphate group, when a protein absorbs it and it's going to change shape, we can use that shape change to do basically everything we need to do in the body. We use that shape change to cause muscles to shorten. We move things across the cell membrane. We can use that to increase, blood pressure through. Basically, the shape change from any protein allows us to do everything that the human body does at the large scale. Any type of action or movement is ultimately driven by the shape change of a protein, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. All right. Now, the last type of organic molecule that I wanted to mention, this is called nucleic acids. Nucleic acids make up DNA. Nucleic acids. So nucleic acids, these make up our genetic code, which is called DNA. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to cells, but our genetic code is this helical spiral staircase, which consists of these repeating units of nucleic acids. The order of these nucleic acids are a code that basically give the cell a recipe book for every protein that cell needs to make. So think of nucleic acids as the parts of our genetic code. This is what makes up our genetic code, and our genetic code is really what tells the cell every protein that it will need to make in its life. Okay, so here are the four major types of organic molecules: carbs, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. I think as you prepare for any quiz or test, the major kind of goal is to, let me shrink that down a little bit, perfect, is to be aware with the major differences between these four basic structures. Okay, all right, thank you.